Welcome to today's episode of History Today. Today we're cracking open the dusty, forgotten old tomb of August 8th, from presidential shenanigans to international superpowers having some fun, all the way to England to check up on what the old blokes are up to. So grab your snacks and prepare to have your mind, if not exactly blown, then at least mildly inconvenienced from the truth. Number 1 on our list of Believe It or Not, August 8th edition, took place on a warm summer day in 1974. The day that saw one Richard Milhous Nixon do something truly revolutionary for a sitting U.S. president. He resigned. That's right, packed up his bags and peaced out. This wasn't some sudden, spontaneous decision, like deciding to finally clean out that mysterious Tupperware in the back of the fridge. Oh no, this was the glorious crescendo of the Watergate scandal, a whole messy opera that started back in 1972, with a rather unsophisticated break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate office complex. Turns out the burglars were less Ocean's 11 and more Three Stooges, but they were linked to Nixon's re-election campaign. And then came the cover-up, which, if we're being honest, was probably more incriminating than the actual break-in. We're talking secret recordings of Oval Office conversations, because who doesn't love documenting their own crimes? Hush money flowing like a leaky faucet, and a whole lot of obstruction of justice. You know, usual presidential affairs. It was like a really bad spy novel, except the spy was the President of the United States, and he just kept hitting record. When the Supreme Court finally forced him to release those infamous White House tapes, which apparently contained more expletives than a pirate convention, the jig was well and truly up. The House Judiciary Committee had already approved articles of impeachment, making his position entirely untenable. He essentially jumped before he was pushed, a move that's less about dignity and more about avoiding the ultimate public spectacle. It's like when you're playing Monopoly and you know you're about to go bankrupt, so you just flip the board and pretend you never even wanted Boardwalk anyway. Except, with the fate of a nation hanging on the balance, and everyone now really suspicious about what else you've recorded. Moving on to the glorious year of 1945, because apparently one massive global conflict just wasn't enough for some people. On August 8th, the Soviet Union decided, you know what, Japan needs a little commie love too. And just like that, they declared war on Japan. Now you might be thinking, wait, wasn't World War II pretty much wrapping up by then? Didn't someone just drop a really big, bright firecracker on Hiroshima just 2 days earlier, and another one on Nagasaki very soon after? And to that I say, precisely. But the Soviets, masters of timing, had signed a neutrality pact with Japan back in 1941. That pact, however, was said to expire in April 1946, and they had conveniently not renewed it. For months, they'd been secretly amassing over 1 million troops along the Manchurian border, just patiently waiting for the opportune moment, like a hungry wolf eyeing a particularly plump, distracted sheep. And after Hiroshima, with Japan clearly on its last legs, that moment arrived. They launched a massive, multi-pronged invasion of Manchuria, Inner Mongolia, and Korea, overwhelming Japanese forces that were already struggling and severely under-equipped. It was less about turning the tide of the war and more about a strategic land grab, carving out their piece of the post-war pie before it was all eaten up. It's the historical equivalent of showing up to the end of a potluck, seeing there's only one sad, wilted salad left, and aggressively declaring you're going to conquer that salad. For the motherland, of course. And finally, for our third slice of August 8th absurdity, let's rewind to 1963. England, a land famous for its polite queues, warm beer, and apparently surprisingly inefficient train security. Because on this very day, a gang of blokes decided to pull off what would become famously known as the Great Train Robbery. This wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing, like impulse buying a questionable novelty hat. Oh no, the gang, led by a charming rogue named Bruce Reynolds, meticulously planned this heist for months. Their target, a Royal Mail train carrying stacks of used banknotes from Glasgow to London. We're talking sacks upon sacks, enough to make a Scrooge McDuck fantasy look modest. How'd they stop a train, you ask? Simple. They tampered with the railway signals. They covered the green light and rigged a battery to light up a red one, forcing the train to stop in the middle of nowhere, specifically at Bride Railway Bridge in Buckinghamshire. Then they boarded the train, brutally overpowered the driver, who sadly was seriously injured, and the rest of the crew, and began offloading sacks of cash with a human chain. It was all about speed and brute force. They made off with a frankly obscene amount of cash, over £2.6 million. The problem, as with many grand schemes, came after the robbery. They fled to a remote farmhouse to lay low and divide the loot, which, in hindsight, probably wasn't the most discreet choice given the sheer volume of cash. It was like trying to hide an elephant in a bathtub. And despite their planning, they left behind a surprising amount of evidence: fingerprints on a milk bottle, even a Monopoly board they were probably playing with the stolen money. The police were on their tails almost immediately. Most of the gang members, including Reynolds and the perpetually smirking Ronnie Beggs, were eventually caught, tried, and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. So there you have it, 3 distinct flavors of historical mayhem, all served up on the same date. August 8th certainly delivered. Anyway, until next time,